and welcome to The Print. I am Debdutta along with my colleague Manisha Mandal here in Kathmandu, and today we are in conversation with Akriti Ghimire, who is the initiator of an Instagram page called How to Desh Vikas, which focuses on simplifying politics and policies for the youth in Nepal. Welcome to The Print, Akriti.
Thank you so much.
To begin with, you have been very active during the whole Gen Z protests that happened and, the whole aftermath of the situation. Could you tell our audience a little bit what led to the beginning of the protest? I know for a fact that it was not just the social media ban or the Nepo babies trend that, first picked up in Indonesia and then the TikTok trends that picked up in Nepal. A lot was brewing, a lot was simmering, and this had been a long time coming.
Yes.
So if I had to ask you from your perspective, what do you think led to the beginning of the moment?
There's a lot of dissatisfaction towards the government, and the fact that, well, before even saying about the government, it's about the people who we've been seeing as we grow up, right? The faces that we've seen as we grow up have always been the same. There's never been a people-centric policy that has come up. Oftentimes, there's so many protests for which people come down to the streets, right? But their problems and their demands are never realized. We've never seen an empathy that has been extended by the government towards its people while bringing about any sort of policies. Yes, this might have seemed like you said, it's sparked as part of a bigger global movement that has been a part of this, but also there's this underlying sense of inequality because of which people's lives have been greatly shaped because of that. There's no quality education. People who do get quality education, they're pushed to certain different countries for higher education. The people who do not have access to quality education and do not have that access to money and wealth, they're pushed to a lot of Middle Eastern countries and other countries for employment. So there's a lot of different levels of grievances, but all of it boils down to systemic corruption.
Right.
So it's not just about people taking in money and then going away. It's systemic corruption to the point of there's a lot of nepotism, people trying to bend policies for their own will, and a lot of that. So it's an accumulation or concoction of all of these multiple different layers and facets that have genuinely got, like, at this point people are emotionally and socially tired of seeing these faces and have lost that hope. So when there's no more hope with the current leaders, no more hope with the current structures, I think that is what led to us coming down to the streets. And to be very honest, I have never seen these many young people on the streets. The day that I saw on the September 8th, people were just pouring in, and it was insane to see that.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how the movement started? Also, are you a Gen Z?
Yes, I am. I'm 26 years old.
Then you are you would be the perfect person to tell us, what happened on the 8th of September, and we know what happened on the 9th of September, but as far as we know, it was a very peaceful protest. Yes. There was music, the people had come out in huge numbers. Yeah. Can you look back and tell us what exactly happened on the 8th of September?
So on the 8th, we reached at 9 a.m. because we were told the protest was going to be at 9. We went there, we sat on the road, we were singing songs, we were chanting old Nepali patriotic songs. It was super, and the fact that the moderator was like, we are here to do a peaceful protest, everybody. So there was that priming of the protest already done. And we had very funny slogans as well, like slogans in our language, in our slangs and everything. The sort of idea in my head was that, okay, this is just the beginning. We're going to have multiple of these protests. We're going to have multiple of peaceful protests, multiple of creative protests. Like, one of the ideas that I had in my head was, oh, Dashain is coming in. We fly kites in Dashain. Why don't we write things that we, as a form of protest against the leaders, So in our heads, as we walked into that, it wasn't to lead a revolution as such, Right. It was just going to be part of multiple movements. And my friends came in, they had to leave for work. So they left around 10:30, they left around 11, So none of us expected the way that it was unfolding. But our initial expectation was it's going to be nice, peaceful. We're going to sit on the streets, we're going to sing, we're going to dance. There was a group of our friends who were there with their DJ sets and who had a lot of music, like musicians in their team, who wanted to make it more creative. So that was the whole vibe, at least in the beginning.
And then what happened next?
So until 11 and 11:30, we are sitting on the ground, a lot of it. So my friend and I, we wanted to take a view from above. So we went around, we went to one of the buildings and went to the first floor. So we wanted to have a view. So what we're seeing from there is there are peaceful protesters on this side. There is a barricade made of police. And it seems the police isn't doing anything, which is fine because it was supposed to be a peaceful protest and everything. But suddenly, from the other side, we see a lot of people on motorbikes who are just like I don't know what that thing is called, but like they're just making such loud noises with their motorbikes, and it seemed that they wanted to rile the crowd up. And there is a certain individual who's like, guys, come, please, like increase the volume and everything. But like the police isn't doing anything, even then, So it's very interesting for us because they didn't seem like they belonged to the Gen Z. They seemed a bit older as well, and it was supposed to be a peaceful protest. There was nothing about like bringing bikes or anything as such. So that felt very fishy. At a point, it started feeling like there were people who were trying to break that barricade, and they were able to. And after that, when the barricade was broken, the police moved towards the parliament. So a lot of people also started walking towards the parliament. And from our view, it's just the people are just coming in. They're just going in, and suddenly we start hearing gunshots. And now we're like, wait, is that a bike or is that a gunshot? Because with the bike also, they're making the same
similar
noise, right?
sounds.
Yeah. And then right in front of us, we see the, what's that called? The water cannon. And people are throwing bottles at those, and suddenly people are throwing stones. What's very interesting is that in that strip of road, you don't find stones, And what I had seen in videos before during the pro-monarchy protest was apparently there are people who actually carry stones to bring and to put it on the street so people have stones to throw. So it's very interesting, So it's like, did people actually come in with the mind that they are going to infiltrate this protest and then create the stone so that people have something to pick it up and throw at? Now, in all of this, yes, we saw a few infiltrators. We saw people who were trying to bring all of those plastic barricades and light the fire. But we also saw people who were scolding that guy and putting that fire out. So there is this multiple different sort of dynamic that we're able to look at this protest. There are school kids, there are different people in uniforms, there are different peaceful protests, but there are also people who generally are walking around in their bikes with just trying to rile up that crowd. Now, it turned violent, but did everybody come in with the intention of turning it into violent, or were there a lot of peaceful protesters who walked in, who saw the way that there were crowds who were trying to rile them up, that turned them violent, or is the police brutality that happened when they started to fire and shoot kids, did that make it even more violent? So there is this multiple nuances of how everything unfolded. Yeah.
And Akriti, you are also a policy initiator, you are a legal researcher. When there was this anger against the government and eventually what led to the movement, a lot of different groups came up.
Yes.
There was a Gen Z group, the Hami Nepal group.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how all of these groups were mobilized first? And secondly, something that was, immensely discussed post the protest was how this app Discord came up. And how, it became like a de facto parliament of sorts. People were voting, people wanted to choose their leaders. How do how did that entire thing happen? And how did you guys decide that, okay, this is what we want to do next? Now the protests have happened. This is what has happened in the protest. This is what we do next. This is what needs to be done. What was that process like?
So I think in order to answer that question, I have to say what role has How to Desh Vikas played in all of this.
Right.
How to Desh Vikas was a platform that I created probably back in January, just as a place where I wanted to put my writings out there. We already had a platform, so I randomly called a few group of people who genuinely wanted to work, who genuinely wanted to research, and then we formed a team. So it wasn't a team of people that I had from before. And also just to say that it's a team of amazing, feisty women. I'd like to say I'm a bit of a coward, but my women, they're just so strong and so feisty.
And your team is all women?
Yes.
Fantastic.
And also we have queer folks, we have Madhesi folks, so we also have people who come from different backgrounds.
So it's a very diverse and inclusive group of people who came together.
Yes, as inclusive as we could be. And also if our backgrounds does not cover everybody, we try to bring in as many voices as we can. But so the way that we saw all of this unfold and go about, we saw what happened. We knew that by the end of September 8th, we knew that this is not how it's going to go, and it has to be much more stronger demands, because the initial demands was demanding a lot of investigations against these corrupt leaders and everybody. Now the demands changed. Now the demands changed about, we need this government done. and we're done for this, right? And at that point, we started researching, we started looking into what does that look like. Now, like you said, there are multiple of these different groups that came about. What I want to emphasize about this movement is this is a leaderless movement.
Right,
And I
absolutely.
think that's the most beautiful part of it, because what we've seen always with a lot of movements is people always look at a face and they go to the streets. They always look at this charming, very masculine personality who they like and they appreciate, and then they go to the streets. That wasn't what happened here. Here, we knew something was wrong. There was a cause that everybody stood for,
And people organically came.
exactly. And I think as much as people try to say, oh, you guys don't have a leader, then let's ask the previous generation to pick one person among their entire generation. Can they do that? And that's the same question for us, right? How can we as the Gen Z pick one leader? It's not possible. And I think that's something we have to accept as well. And what we need to understand is that, like, we've never seen good leadership. We've never had a really good example of, okay, this is somebody that we really love and respect and we want to emulate their leadership. When we haven't seen good leadership, what example do we have? What role model do we have to put forth a good leader, So I do believe that there needs to be a lot of grace given to our generation as well, and to also understand that we as a generation have been deliberately kept out of the conversation of politics and policies. Like, as much as I've worked in policy and politics, I know if I hadn't done the jobs that I've done, I would not have any understanding of the language of the law, the language of the politics. I still don't. I'm still learning, And I think that was one of my biggest reflections during my college times, was that, yeah, sure, I have all of this great privileged education, but I'm still not able to understand what's going on. So what's wrong? There's something which is gravely missing, right, in that space of communication. Now, we sort of belong to this group of people. Now we're sort of suddenly pushed into this space where we're suddenly having to make sense of everything. Oh, there are negotiations. Oh, we have to choose a leader. Oh, we have to send somebody in. We have no idea. So what we started doing was researching. We started talking to people, whoever we could. We started asking them, what does this look like? We started looking into the Comprehensive Peace Accord of 2006. What does that agreement look like? What is an interim government? In fact, what is the difference between the normal government and an interim government? We don't even know that. So we needed to understand that as well. So for us in this point of time was, okay, what does that mean? What mandate does it have? What is possible? What is not possible? Now there is this whole point of like, oh, we need to select somebody to negotiate, right? Now does that individual who negotiates translate into that person becoming the interim government's PM or not, right? So there are so many of these questions. What we did was we started researching, we started looking up things. There was a team which was looking into power vacuums. What does power vacuum globally look like? We're looking into Bangladeshi movement, we're looking into Indonesia's movement. And we're trying to design that roadmap as well. And all of that is not to fearmonger, but for us to understand the process. And that was what we were putting out as well, with as much honesty and integrity and transparency as much as we could. Because we need to understand, and we knew other people needed to understand. So in this part of the movement, there are a lot of different people who've done frontline work, who've done rescue work, who've done a lot of people who've been on the ground and who've done voluntary work of giving people water. Our role in this has been research and documentation and trying to bring everybody's agendas. There was one of the things that we did was like we collected everybody's agendas of these documents, and then we created a common grounds document. So we created an Excel sheet, we wrote down what people are asking, and we put it down and said that these seem like the common demands. Do people agree? And then we started drafting letters to the former Chief Justice Sushila Karki as well.
Right.
So we're like, you know what, these seems like the common demand. Do you want to have a look at it, So there are these things that we did. What else did we do? We designed an interim government roadmap. What could that look like? And then we were like, you know what, this is not enough. We need to start drafting an agreement, because there needs to be an agreement that has to be signed. So those are a whole lot of different work that we've done over this time.
And Akriti, if I were to ask you, now that an interim government is in place, now that so much is being done, what does the youth of Nepal want? What do they think the government should look like? How much role can the youth play? And whichever, post the transitional government, once elections are held and whichever government comes into power, do you think it will have enough space for the youth to speak up and make their demands felt?
I am a radical optimist. So I would like to say I truly believe that there will be that space. What we want is transparency and a lot of empathy and clear communication. I think that's what we want, and that's something that we've never seen from our leaders before. One thing that I want to say is that, like, the Gen Z did not go to the streets to claim power.
Right.
We went because we wanted a competent leadership, somebody with integrity and empathy. And these are things that have been missing from all the leadership that we've seen throughout. And that's what we want as well. But right now we're at this point where, of course, our initial demands of looking into anti-corruption, that's not just going to cover everything at this point, right? At this point, we need to make sure that all the victims are getting all sorts of relief and reparations that they need. We know that all of these people who went to the streets to protest, and especially the ones who went as peaceful protesters but became violent in the aftermath and in those moments, they need to be protected as well. We need to make sure we have these mechanisms to protect them. And now we also do need these investigation commissions that will probe into these leaders' properties, and we understand the government's mandate is election. But you know what? If you look at the way things are, these same parties are going to run for elections and they're going to come in, which is so infuriating. So that is why do not we start asking a re-registration of these political parties? And we want them to show all of their assets clearly. We want to see their financial assets. We want to see their election financing. We want to see we want to see these leaders financing transparency. So there can be a lot more of these mechanisms that we can redo in order to make sure that the playground is going to be fair moving on. Because it's not fair, right? Yeah, sure, a few leaders' houses have been burned, but corruption is still there. The second-tier leaders are still there. The third-tier leaders are still there, who surprisingly are not demanding accountability from the top-level leadership. In fact, this should have been a very, very, very pivotal moment for the political parties to demand reform within their own parties.
Absolutely.
To demand that rehaul, to demand transparency within the parties, because this is a multi-party democratic system. Yes, we need parties, right? We need that democratic process. But why are people not demanding that sort of reform within the political parties right now? And I think they're missing that right point, and they're still giving space, giving path to the same traditional old ways of godifying their leaders. Yeah.
Akriti, do you think the youth has lost faith in, a traditional form of governance or electoral systems? What do there have been so many youth-led movements, especially in South Asia, in the past years. We see one happening in Nepal right now, where, the youth is demanding accountability, transparency from their leaders, more involvement. Why do you think the youth is so disillusioned right now? As yourself, as someone who is part of this, what do you think can be done apart from the reforms? How can their voices be made more prominent? How can they come up to the forefront and have equal say in what happens in their government and how the governance looks like in a country where the youth is the one who led to the toppling of a government?
Yeah. So right now, where are we is the question is that we are trying to get, whether we call that an agreement, whether we call that a people's mandate or a declaration, but we need some sort of documentation which precisely outlines the demands of this movement. Because if we don't have that document, what is the purpose of us losing so many lives? Like, what is the purpose of the fact that 3 top levels of Nepal's government has been completely burnt to ashes, So there needs to be that government, and that document, and in that document, one of the few things that we've proposed is that there needs to be a youth advisory council, and that youth advisory council has to be very inclusive of multiple different facets of the Gen Z people, who should have a direct voice and say in order to advise the government. That's what is one of our demands as well. And we're hoping that that will give a framework for the government to start working and incorporating the demands of the Gen Z. Now, the other question will be, how do we go about finding these people? How do we, on what basis are we going to choose the youth advisory council, right? There is another thing that it seems that we need to take the forefront of, which is there needs to be a bigger Gen Z committee, which could act as a watchdog for the government. Apparently, after every Andolan or movement that has happened in Nepal, there has always been a very strong Nagarik Samaj, or like this watchdog committee who have played an active role in holding the government accountable. It's very important that we also come formalize, non-formalize in whatever ways we can, which necessarily doesn't need to have hierarchical structure, which can have a flat organizational structure as well. But this sort of committee that can play as a watchdog, but also designs a clear leadership rubric or a selection rubric to identify what kind of people we send in the advisory council. And to be honest, we've already prepared that selection rubric as well. And that rubric was proposed as a way to select the ministers or like the cabinet ministers or multiple different leadership positions. Because if they do not fulfill those criteria, I think what's the point, you know, if you can't have competent leaders, if you can't have leaders who will genuinely lead with empathy and care.
And Akriti, one last question. When you elect leaders or when you choose leaders, what are the qualities that you are looking for now? Like you said, empathy, of course. But apart from that, what is the kind of leader that the Gen Z in Nepal or the youth in Nepal now wants or, you know, demands or looks up to? And do you have people that you look up to right now, or do you think that one of these leaders or one of the people who govern us will come up from inside these movements, you know? What do you think it looks like right now?
One of the things that I see very clearly happening with the Gen Z choosing Sushila Karki is a very strong message to the traditional narratives of leadership, which often has been loud, which has always been occupying spaces and like, oh, you know, all of that very loud, rowdy sort of leadership that we're clearly done with. We want actions, we want solutions, and we want people who will tell us as it is. We don't want people who are going to, you know, mix it and sugarcoat it and fabricate it in a very diplomatic terms. In fact, tell us as it is. Tell us what is possible and tell us what is not possible so that we know what kind of expectations to have, right? And I say empathy because that is only possible when you genuinely care about your country and about the people in the country. It does not come when you just think that you can make all the decisions. And also, we want people who can work in teams. We don't want people, we don't want narcissistic people. We don't want people who think that they're the best and they know everything. We want people who genuinely have the humility to admit that yes, this is how much I know, and I may not know more things, but I have the ability and capacity to ask for help. So I will seek for help, and I will create a team of experts who will also hold me accountable, who will also give me constructive feedback, and I will also be transparent with them as well. So what I see is a pivotal moment of redefining what leadership looks like as well. And I think we are moving towards that path, which of course with a lot of traditional powers and what they already have as structures, I hope, and I genuinely hope that we as a generation, and not just us, even the previous generation and the generations before that, have this capacity in admitting that we are done with the previous styles of leadership. We want change, and we will make sure that that change will be embodied not just in the top leadership that we choose, but also in the sort of leadership that we choose at our local levels, you know, about who do we push forth in our community as leaders, whose voice do we incorporate, and whose voice do we make sure that will be heard in these rooms as well.
Right from the grassroots to the top.
Yes. And what I want to emphasize is that, like, as we talk about corruption and everything, corruption is a culture in Nepal, and it's a culture globally, right? And for corruption to end, it's not just an onus of the institution or the leader at the top. It's also an onus that falls on the community to take that ownership that, you know what, I will follow the structures, and if the structures are not right, I will work towards making that structures, as opposed to seeing that like, oh, there's this structure, but I will bend my way and I will use everything to take benefit of that. So it's also a question for the entire society and the community about what kind of values do we hold as individuals and as community, and not just as people at the top level of the government, you know, because elections are coming up. Who are we going to vote for? That's a question that is a question that will be posed at each and every one of us, right? If all of our parents and everybody is complaining about the leadership, then please show it in the ballot box. Please show it in the ballot box.
Thank you, Akriti. This has been an insightful conversation, and I know it's a long road ahead, but I wish you and the youth of Nepal a very, very good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for speaking to
Thank you.
ThePrint.
Yeah.